Hi, I'm Regina Taylor, the curator of the Black Album mixtape. We're here with Kevin Arkadie. He is a producer and a writer, famous for New York Undercover, The Shield, New York PD Blue. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here, Regina.
Very happy that you're here with us. So we went to school together at Southern Methodist University back in the 80s, late 70s.
So
80s.
I was going to say, yeah.
I'm sorry, what?
No, you said 80s. I'm like, it's a little bit earlier than that.
A little earlier. I graduated in 81.
Okay.
Yes. So what brought you to SMU?
Oh, I was living there. My mom worked in the government, and she transferred from Washington, D.C. to Dallas, Texas when I was in high school. And that's where I finished high school. And SMU had a highly regarded film school at the time, as well as a highly regarded theater school, which I discovered once I got to SMU. And, I started out as a film major, but I felt more comfortable over in the theater department. So it was close to home. They were very generous at the time with scholarships and various things like that. And they made it easy for me to go there versus some haughty-taughty California school where I really wanted to go.
Okay. It was a very good theater school. That's why I was there. I started out as a journalism major and then switched over to theater. There were some wonderful teachers there that gave, I think, a really good foundation. Did you find that the foundation was useful moving forward?
Yeah, I give credit. I totally give credit to primarily the Meadow School of the Art and the teachings I got there, but also I was trying to do a double major or minor in just literature. SMU had a very, very distinguished creative writing. A couple of professors who were very accomplished and very, very good instructors. So between that and what I got in theater, and particularly because I never really succeeded as an actor, but I had all the foundations for story analysis and character analysis, and all those things were sort of ingrained in me in such a way that made a career out of being a writer. So all in all, they just created a pretty good product, apparently.
Absolutely. You're a living testimony to that. There are very few African Americans in the program during that time. What was that like? Were there any challenges to that?
It was a challenge every day. I'll tell you, the first time we had a class and everybody said, let's go outdoors and sit in the grass.
Yeah.
That's just a cultural thing. I'm like, what?
Mm.
No. My household, no. We don't go out and sit in the grass. No, we sit in chairs. Yeah, so it was definitely every day in the beginning was something culturally new and different. And whereas you could go through each and every category and it was, check the box for, was this new or was this different or was it challenging? At the end of the day, for me, it was probably a good thing. It was a good thing because, if you adapt, you learn, I learned a lot of different skills. I mean, I graduated. There was a time where I never thought I would graduate from SMU.
Why did you think that?
Because I didn't belong there. That's why.
Didn't feel like you fit in.
It wasn't that I didn't feel like it. I did not fit in.
Got it.
But again, even then, but yeah, I go, but this is okay. This is good because it's really, I think I was more prepared coming out of the school. This is not going to go on a poster, obviously, but I was more prepared to deal, particularly with the arts.
Yes.
And pursuing a career in the arts, coming out with the training on the plus side and on having to fend for myself and, being kind of a rare commodity there. So when I actually graduated, I felt more comfortable than I believe a lot of people. Yeah. And I had more tools.
What was interesting to me was that you always seemed really laid back, cool, and you're always networking. People seem to be very comfortable with you, and you carried that through to the professional life, moving to LA, and continued to be that guy. that was open, welcoming, always cool to be spending some time with.
Well,
That
okay.
was the impression.
That's okay. All right. That's, you know what? I'm going to tell you, no, you're the only person I've ever felt say that.
Ah,
Honest. Yeah. Yeah. Some of the people I've kept up with over the years have said, man, you are unhappy. So anyway, like I said, that's the first time I literally, I don't think I've heard that from anyone else.
oh,
So maybe I was open. I was open to you and cool to you. So,
okay. Well, that's
or
interesting.
maybe I was all those things that you're saying, but it's all subjective, isn't it? It's like,
Yes, it is, isn't it? Uh,
so.
after graduation, you decided to move to LA. You were
Actually,
in New York for a while, and then you moved to LA.
I was in New York for about 10 years.
I remember seeing one of your first plays, production, Still Life, uh, and it was really wonderful. It was very deeply layered. It was complicated in terms of the storyline and the characters, and taking chances in terms of breaking what might be what one looks at in terms of an African American character on the stage. And I think you carried that through in terms of film. Was that difficult to create these characters that broke new ground?
Was it difficult? No. Obviously, getting a production of any kind, that's the difficult part.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I've always felt, and again, this goes way back to when I was a kid, up through school, and starting writing at a younger age, and reading everything,
Mm-hmm.
reading anything I could get my hands on, whether it was, Western European, whether it was Buddha, whether it was Vietnamese, Chinese, American, South, Nora Hill Thurston. I just absorbed everything. And it was really more about, what's the story and what's the human condition,
Mm-hmm.
and what I still love to find. I've sort of figured out how to be passionate about pretty much everything I jump into.
Mm-hmm.
But, when I was younger, I generally was motivated by the things that made me angry. And it wasn't, look, lots of things made me angry. It wasn't just being a black man in America. I'm going, that's a given. But there's a whole bunch of other stuff that makes me angry that I can write about as well, because lots of people are covering the angry black person, who had struggled and all those sorts of things. So I go, okay, that story is going to be told. What are the stories that I can tell that I don't think anyone else can tell? So I found there's a few things like that. Like the play you're talking about, I very distinctly remember walking down the street in New York City, broke. I don't know if I had this little military, one of the few things I could afford was that I had this green military coat. My
Yeah.
hair was all out to here. And I walked past this church where they're talking about how the United States is going around the world sterilizing people. And I just go, well, that's BS, but I got nothing better to do. So I just popped into the church, and they had some little video that looked like Reefer Madness. I don't know if you've ever seen Reefer Madness, where, everybody's like getting high and their eyes are getting big and the evils of marijuana. So these guys are doing the same thing with like Colombian peasants. Like the doctors are all evil with twirling mustaches, and they were talking about how they were destroying families. And it just seemed like such a bogus piece of propaganda that was unrealized.
Mm-hmm.
But so I went home. I go, okay, well, anyway, it got me out of the cold for, like about an hour. And I'm not sure exactly when, but one day I woke up and I said, let me look into this. And I found out it wasn't as hyped up and evil as they were talking about, but we were actually doing that. The Peace Corps was going in various places around the world at the request of the governments, and sterilizing the indigenous populations, or just the poor people, at the request of the government, telling them to come in, get inoculated, let's do a check, just a physical. And they were coming out not able to reproduce children. So that was me getting angry at me for being ignorant. And so anyway, so that's how the play that you saw, which even further, it wasn't until way after that play was written that the laws went away in the U.S. because in Virginia, in Virginia, the mortality rate for newborns is higher than anywhere else in the country. It's because the midwives are just basically, if the baby wasn't perfect, they just put them underwater, and that was it. Just never happened. So all those things, again, it was sort of like fueled by, geez, how could I be so stupid? How could I be so naive to just drink the Kool-Aid? And so, we go through life. We're taught this, we're taught that, and I just try not to drink the Kool-Aid anymore. And somebody tells me something, I'm going, well, okay, maybe.
You were in New York for 10 years then, and was the mindset that you would be a playwright? You're pursuing writing plays. Where did film come back in?
Well, first I was going to be, as you know, an actor. And I still remember going to Riverside Church in the dead of winter. You had to get there like 5:30, 6 a.m., whatever, to, sign your name to audition. And I got up to, I was like maybe the second or third person left. And there was like, 100 people behind me. And they go, that's it, we're closing auditions. And I'm like, I can't live like this. I go, no, so then a few people, I would just write some scenes just to get people together on the weekends and have some coffee and donuts.
I remember that. That's what I was saying. You're such a cool guy. You were gathering people around the table to read your plays. I loved it.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. So in that, yeah.
Networking.
Okay. But see, wait. So that was, as I was saying, when I got out of college,
yes,
I was better prepared when because we were all in New York, right? I'm like, what's wrong? Everybody, you guys, come on over. You guys are having a rough time. I'm like, SMU trained me to deal with struggling in a big city. So I'm going like, okay, y'all come on over. Just, I can grab some. I can get some donuts and coffee.
And for starving artists, that was, a great enticement. Coffee and some donuts. Read some plays. Yes.
I have no idea how I did it, but I just go, okay. And sometimes I would just write stuff just so we'd have something to read. And, I forget. It could have been you who said, you should try putting a play together. I would just write these little scenes, these little things, those little still lifes. So that's how the playwriting started. Because again, same thing as an actor. As an actor, I was like, I think I have a story to tell. I think I have a unique thing in me that I can give to other people. And plus, I'm like, really validate. I need some validation. I need some, a lot of acting. This, you can debate this, but I think a lot of acting is you putting yourself out there to be validated, to have people accept who you are and what you're bringing. So it worked. It seemed to be working better on the page. They're like, oh, so I was getting some validation there. I'm like, okay, well, let me stick with this and see how this goes.
Yeah.
And of course, it was a struggle. And I was in and out of New York. When I ran out of money, I would go down to my aunt's house in DC, or my mom would send me $100 or whatever. So I was in and out, but I finally did get a production, the one you're talking about.
Yes.
And that took about 5 years to get produced. And I got a pretty decent New York Times review.
Yes, it was a very good review. Yeah.
And so but people pulled strings and got a New York Times. Bud Schulberg is who pulled some strings, and Fred Hudson. And so I got a decent review, and I go, okay, so I guess I can write. And then it was at the same time that, who's the guy? Reagan came in, David Stockman, they gutted the NEA. I go, man, it took me 5 years to get this production going with a lot of money being floating around. And I'll tell you, here's the thing. August Wilson was becoming very, very, very popular. And people were saying, do you have anything like August Wilson? And I'm like, no. No, he's a great writer. He's telling stories that are him and come from his passion and his experience. And I'm like, I don't have no August Wilson. I'm a Black kid from DC who moved to Texas, who moved to New York. Those are the stories I got for you. So I go, well, maybe it's time to go out west. And I had been thinking about, I had been writing television, samples. I had a couple of movies. I had a couple of TV samples, hour drama and half hour. And I had what I thought was a really good movie. And it was a really good movie because it got my career going. And I never really wanted to write for television. And as a matter of fact,
What movie was that?
It's never been made.
Oh, okay. But it opened doors, that sample.
It opened doors. And again, I'll tell you what it was. I mean, Richard Donner was thinking about doing it for a minute. It was a sniper in DC. So he was thinking about doing it right at the same time that, guess what? There was a sniper in DC.
For real, yes.
Real. And he goes, no, okay, I guess we're not going to do this now. So that was like the coming and going of that. And it would be, I should revisit it because it was about a Vietnam vet on both sides. Like a South Vietnamese soldier who had migrated to the US, and the lead character was a Vietnam vet. And so they were involved in this mystery of like, okay, who's going around, taking people out in Little Saigon.
Right.
And, so anyway, it's a pretty good story. It was pretty horrific, actually. I look at it now, I'm like, whoa. It's sort of like my interpretation from, we had a lot of vets.
Right.
We were at SMU. And I don't know if you ever had any real encounters, but I'd be sitting at a table and these guys would put their pistols together and they point them at me and they go, what do you do now? And I go, I guess I die. I guess. Because, it's just one of those things and they're just testing you to see how cool you are. Because, so I'm like, I took that. And then I had a job in New York City with an exec who had been a tunnel rat in the early days of Vietnam.
Wow.
And he told me some stories. And, we're in the RCA building. And like I said, he was an exec. I was working as a temp. Once I figured out I could type, I could actually eat. And that's how I got the donuts and juice, probably. And we would start talking about these old stories. And he would get up from his desk and go crouch in a corner in his suit. And we would talk for like hours. Well, as much as you can talk during a workday, but like, that's fascinating. That is fascinating. And
what was your breakthrough in terms of breaking into writing for TV film?
You mean getting a check?
Yes.
It goes like this. When I came to LA, I said, look, if I'm going to be miserable, I'm going to be miserable in LA, where it's sunny. I saw some homeless people. I saw some homeless people pushing carts who look good. I'm like, okay, if that's my future, that's going to work for me.
Okay.
Or I'm going to go to law school. I'm going to clean up and go to law school. But let me go out there and see what it's like there. I did a play reading. I signed up for a play reading series at Hollywood and Highland in LA. It took about a year because everybody did that. And so my play finally came up, and it was a play about living in the East Village with a punk rock band, which of course was based on reality. Yeah. And out of that, an actress was talking to her agent. The agent said, do you know any writers? She goes, I know one. I just did a play. It seemed pretty good. I got an interview with the agent, and I had my movie. I had my 1 hour script. She kept going like, what do you have? What else do you have? I go, I got a couple of 1 hours. What else do you have? You have any comedy? I go, I got a comedy. I'm not a comedy writer. She read it and she goes, I had some chuckles. That's good enough, because, and so then I got introduced to Kevin Sullivan, who had a TV series called Night Watch. And I basically walked in, we talked, he looked at me, he goes, okay, you're hired. Oh. I'm like, well, what does that mean? And so, yeah, that happened just that fast. And
right. So that was the first time you were in a script room.
I wasn't in a script room. No,
what are you doing?
I just went in, they said, we're just gonna go generate a beat sheet and, here's generally the story. So I called around for like a week going, what's a beat sheet? I have no clue what a beat sheet is. So I finally called the producer up and I'm like, I'm sorry, man, but what's a beat sheet? And so he told me, and he gave me a couple of examples, and I did that. And I wrote a script, but there was no writer's room. It was like me coming up with thoughts and ideas. And putting them on paper, submitting them, and they shot the episode. It was on ABC, and then the show got canceled right after my episode aired.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, so that was the first time I got paid to write for TV.
Mm.
And then I went a few more. Then I went a couple of years.
A couple of years without a job.
A couple of years going back downtown LA, working in law firms, word processing, being a legal assistant. You know, paying the bills, making a living.
Mm-hmm.
A poor man's living, but you know, a living. And you know, just writing whenever I could.
Right.
And I'm not even exactly sure. The next opportunity I got a really great opportunity that I never got paid for. And this was in the early days of Fox. There was a show called Alien Nation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Fox had a lot of waivers. So one of the waivers was, because it was a fledgling network, you could do all the work and then they would approve it and get you paid, but you had to do all the work first.
Mm-hmm.
So I met Diane Froloff, Amy, Andy Schneider, who were running that show. I couldn't tell you exactly. It's probably through my agent for sure. And so I did all the work for an episode of Alien Nation, and literally was turning in the outline and the story to start work, and the show was canceled.
Mm.
So then I may be stretching this out. You know, these are dog years, by the way. It may not have been all these years I'm talking about, but it felt like it. So another couple of years later, they were on the show called, and this is Andy and Diane, were on a show called Northern Exposure.
Yeah.
Which was
Falls in Brand.
Falls in Brand. And they sent me to the show that you were on. They said, Judy Ann Mason started the show, didn't quite work out for them. And so there were 4 writers, and I guess they needed a Black one. And I went in, interviewed.
Yes, they did.
Well, I'm the facetious, the sarcasm is they needed one, right?
Got it.
So that ended up being, I went in, I interviewed, they had my work, they had my samples, Diane and Andy, you know, it's all about relationships. So they said, hey, the guy did this, he did that, it was really good to work with. And so I met with David, Henry, Barbara, and they go, I think Barbara said, do you really have to jump the broom to be legally married? And I'm like, no. She goes, okay, good. We want you on board here. So just little tidbits that I remember. I'm like, wow, okay. So that was my first staff job.
Got it.
And
well, you were actually getting paid on a regular basis.
On a regular basis. So that was like a 3 or 4 year period from landing in LA to actually being able to get dental insurance.
Got it. And I have to say, I appreciated your being on the show and playing the character of Lily on that show, being able to talk to the producers, talk to the writers about the culture that we were depicting in terms of the African Americans in this town, this particular time, and dealing with the civil rights movement. I thought I appreciated your being in the room and having a voice.
Well, one of the things, it was a pretty select group of writers, I have to say.
It was a great group of writers, I have to say.
And people in the sense of, you know, like they would say, like a situation with, you know, I think the thing that really got me hired was that Thanksgiving episode.
Yeah.
And which I did very, very well with, and which of course you did extremely well with. And they would say, so what would happen? What would happen in Lily's house here? I go, well, from a Black perspective. And I would go, this, or this. And they would go, oh, you mean it wouldn't just be this? I'm like, no. Every Black household is going to be different. Like every household is different. So I think they were kind of surprised that there was no like formal direction that a story would go or a character would go. I go, no, they're pretty complex when you sit down and talk. It just really isn't too. So it's up to Lily and what she's feeling, even to the point of that day. So that's what I remember contributing more than anything. I'm like, yeah, guys, it can go this way, it can go that way. They're all real.
Right.
Lots of real choices. There's not just one.
And it's essential then in terms of the writers in the room to be able to have those conversations. Sometimes they're hard conversations. Sometimes people are open to it. People are reframing their minds in terms of what they think they know and what might be cultural divides.
Yeah. Now I had I call it a cultural conversation yesterday.
Mm.
I don't know if I can jump to the present day, but
Yes, please do. What are you working on right now?
it's a show currently it's called Sacrifice. We're looking at new titles potentially. It's a BET show, and it's on BET Plus, which is their new streaming platform. To give it the full plug, it's got Paula Patton, Richard Roundtree, Erica Ash, Lamont Rucker, and some other, let me think, Vanessa Bell Calloway, and an assortment of other people.
Yeah.
Other really super talented people. And we were talking about the high profile Black actors command a pretty good price. They command a premium price. And I, to really sort of like summarize it, I just said, look, listen, on a white show, you have about 20 options. So, you can go down the list. Oh, I couldn't get that. This person worked. That would work. Right? I go, but when you get into the Black world, there's only like 3, So, and those 3 know what their value is on the market. So that's why we end up spending more money on the recognizable names from a producing standpoint.
Yes. And you're both producer and writer on this show, and you are, from getting a regular gig and a regular paycheck with I'll Fly Away, you work steadily on really.
There's been some gaps.
But in terms of this industry and how difficult this industry is, you are prolific. You are still doing it. You are still working it. Yes.
Every time I committed to leaving, I got a phone call.
Leaving to do what? What would you want to do?
I took the law LSAT 3 times. I got admitted to law schools twice. So I was like, okay. I know I can do that because I worked so many years in law offices, like down on Wall Street, and then when I came to LA, I worked downtown LA at some really super big firms, and I go, yeah, I can totally do this.
Okay, and that would be your passion? Would you be passionate about that?
No, that would be
what kind of law?
That would be the law that was the law that would support my alcoholism. I go that I'll be able to get through it. I'll do the work, and I'll be intoxicated a lot of the time if I do that. That was my feeling. That was my feeling. Maybe that's how I was talking myself into not really going that direction.
Got it. Yes. And instead you're doing this, and you do great work. You do great work each and every time. From New York Undercover to NYPD Blue to The Shield to a whole host of shows, you are there. And we appreciate your being there because we can recognize ourselves through your eyes. I think that's important work, and appreciate you very much for that. What's the difference between entering, say, I'll Fly Away was in the 90s, early 90s, and being placed in these rooms and having people value your perspective because that was something new in certain areas that people were trying to figure. I remember the conversations about trying to figure out how to find some Black writers and what that meant. That was some new language in terms of episodic national TV and programming. What's the difference between your entry then and say now, right now?
Well, now there's so much content.
Yes.
There's just room for so many more people. people of color, specifically Black people of color. I think Asians and Hispanics have some catching up to do by the numbers, and it's just easier. And nowadays, they'll, shows will be purchased knowing they have to go get Black writers.
Knowing they have to.
Yeah, knowing with the intention of doing that. And, with the show comes Black writer. And more, there is.
That is now a given, yes.
Yeah. I've been doing it for a long time. So that's one of the things. So way back when, there's only 3 networks. And, first they had to make a commitment to putting Black people on staff, and then they had to find them. And, I remember when I started on I'll Fly Away, I had to write, it was 50-50. I had to write for you, and I had to write for Sam Waterston. Something when I was in my formulative years said, I better learn how to write white. And so I went on, I would write some Black stuff. I would write some pure white stuff.
What does that mean? Break that down.
What does it mean?
Yes.
I go, this play has nothing but white people in it. That's what it means. It's not a Black story. It's a white suburban story. Now, what is that? And so then I have to go do the research, and I have to listen. I have to listen to people. I have to listen to, the characters that I know, and the characters, the people that I know, and the people that I experience. And I'm like, okay, what do they care about that's a little bit different than what I care about? How do they, where are their values weighted versus where I weight mine? And, then I started going, okay, just started seeing through that prism, or at least believing that I saw through that prism. And I succeeded somewhat, because my first paying gig was a play. There was a development thing at the Philadelphia Drama Guild, and it was a play about a suburban white family. Now, the story was the mom, after all having like 6-7 kids, finally came out and took on a lover. So she was gay. So that was really the story. But this is something that I witnessed, I experienced. I was fortunate enough to be on the inside to a large degree of that family, and watch all the angst and how things are sort of uprooted.
Right.
A nice Catholic family with lots of kids. They had like 8 or 9 kids. And so I go, oh, okay, that's interesting to me.
You could write about it authentically from your own experience.
I could. Obviously, I couldn't write about the mom. So I don't know. Don't ask me how. It seemed to work. Just be, the mother with the children. Some things are universal, and it doesn't really matter what your gender is, or these things. So I kind of tap into that whenever I can, because if anything, if I'm successful, I still, that Joseph Campbell stuff that I would have never read had I not been at SMU. Something of a myth, hero, it's fundamental in here, even though I can't quite remember the name, but I still have Joseph Campbell tapes that I listen to periodically. And so I rely on that quite a bit.
It's interesting because you're coming back to experiences at SMU, and certainly for me, growing up in segregation, for the most part, I did go to school at certain points, high school, a bit of elementary, with white people. But other than that, when I went home, I was surrounded by Black people. That was my experience. That was my upbringing until I went to SMU, and I started actually having friends that were white, and got to know white people on different levels. Other than a bit of a distance, it became quite familial to a certain degree. And it really rearranged how I saw people, certain assumptions I might have, certain things I thought I knew, but certainly as an African-American growing up in America, it seems that I knew more about them than they knew about me. And that was usually the challenge. That was usually the conversations we would have that would kind of like break through to see on what level of friendship you might have moving forward. It is interesting then being a writer, being an observer of people, human nature, and being a witness, being a writer, then filtering that through. And you have had great opportunities to work different sides in terms of presenting stories.
I grew up in, my earliest years until I was a teenager were in Washington, D.C. D.C., I remember asking my mom, where are all those white people who are on TV?
Mm. Hmm.
I ain't see them. They just weren't a part of my life. They were part of television. And she goes, well, you'll see them soon enough.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, so then we just, as we moved out, by the time I got to Dallas, I'd lived in all black, mixed, all white, we were only one of the two or three families. So it was very much, it was culturally, it was a culturally diverse upbringing.
It is then with your stories, with your storytelling, an opportunity right now, differences. Opportunity right now, I think it's like a renaissance of people wanting to have Black stories told on these. You have all of these platforms now wanting content and searching for Black stories. Why is that right now?
The easiest answer is Netflix comes along, and other platforms have now grabbed on. Netflix just originally said, we want to service underserved audiences. This conversation had been going on for my entire career.
Yes, long time.
And I was certainly banging the drum, going, guys, these stories, you have a huge audience out there that will grab onto these. But I wasn't an exec. I wasn't Bezos. I wasn't, I forget the guy who started Netflix. I wasn't that guy. So it took that person to go, we're going to service this audience. And you notice they're trying to service every audience.
Right. Right, because before entering in the 90s, people were saying, well, you can't have Black leads. There's no audience for that. You're relegated to, a side best friend entering there. But now the myth has been dispelled. And so you do have these.
Well, it's a remnant of colonialism. And I've actually heard people say way back when, they'll watch what we watch, or they'll like what we like. And that was the dismissive attitude that was prevalent until not too long ago. And so now we have, there's just a lot more stories out there, a lot more representation, a lot more characters.
Different types of characters, different types of storylines outside the box. Yes.
Right. So that's the HBOs, that's the Netflixes. I mean, if you really look, it's the ones who can afford to take risks.
Right.
The networks are better, but most people I know can't wait till it gets to Netflix, or can't wait till it shows on Amazon Prime, or HBO is the first stop, and then Showtime, and then Stars, and then Netflix, Amazon. And then you go, oh, well, what's on network TV? But that's just my community, because I know that network TV still dominates the viewership in the US. So
with COVID-19, practices have changed, industries have shut down. People seem to be shifting too from Hollywood, and other doors are opening up in other areas. So there's a different type of gatekeeping, or some of the gatekeepers have been removed in terms of people who can tell their stories and have access and distribute, not only in a grassroots kind of way, but it is about platforms that people can draw audiences to.
Yeah, no, there's anybody can be creative. Anybody can do a story. It's work.
Yeah.
You run across a lot of folks who are going, wow, but I need the extra money. I'm like, no, you don't. You don't need the money. I mean, You just need,
Mm-hmm.
I go,
Right.
if you really want to tell your story, that's all you need this day and age.
How do you feel about that? That everybody can create and distribute to have a voice. What are the pros and cons of that? Is there an issue then of quality?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like, by and large, I mean, there's that old saying that the cream rises to the top. It's just got to go a longer way.
Mm.
It's got to rise through a lot more things. But I think there's value. There's value in any story that anybody can tell. Now, the trick is, if you don't have the craft to make it compelling, well, then you can quickly just go find something else. You can go find something else, and you can go find something else.
Mm-hmm.
And usually by word of mouth, things that are really good will come around. It may take some time.
Yeah.
It may take time, but like a couple of years after something has come and gone, and people go, "Oh, you got to watch this. You got to watch this." I'm like, "Yeah." It was, at first, years ago, I was like, "Wow, I was 3 or 4 years old. I mean, how good can it be?" And then you look at it and you go, "Oh, wow, this is really good." It just never caught fire until it had already expired, but the story was out there. They did it. The passion was there. The vision was there. And for all intent and purpose, no story runs on forever. And maybe that was the life of that story. So I think it's very cool. I think it's actually a great thing. More people get a chance. The more, it's a numbers game. The more people who are doing it means I think we have a better shot of people being brilliant. Because I think there's plenty of brilliant people out there who for whatever reason don't go this direction, don't go that direction, but with a little bit of encouragement, you just never know who's going to pop up and just be not just a one-time brilliant thing, but someone who can be culturally significant, over an extended period of time. So there's more chances of that.
Mm-hmm.
But we talked about this too. But they just need to be internally. They just need to keep the bar high.
Right.
Because there is still a thing of, here's what they will watch. Here's what we're going to do. And I try to, I was about to lay out some bullshit, black on black crime still sells.
Mm.
I mean, if you look around, the most popular shows for our audience have quite a bit of violence. That's just a fact. And so a lot of times the default will be you start out to tell a really, now there's more opportunities where you can start out to tell a very nuanced, unique story, and you end up having done that. Mm-hmm. But if anything starts to trickle and go a little south or this way or that way, well, what about gangs? What about this? What about that? What about a gun? Those things still come in if you are looking for audiences. And I'm as guilty of that as anybody, because that's not being inauthentic. That to me is kind of a dilemma. You're not being inauthentic. I try to have it be meaningful. If there's going to be violence, try.
Well, Mr. Kevin, I thank you for your time. It's been good catching up with you. I applaud you for all that you're doing, all that you've done, all that you continue to do. And we know that it ain't easy. And we know in terms of it not being easy that you don't search for the easiest way. I appreciate your work. I've appreciated your work since the beginning. And I continue to support and applaud you right now. Thank you.
Well, right back at you, Regina. I think, what you're doing here is marvelous. It's amazing. And I know how much work is involved in what you're doing right now, in addition to all your other things. So I'm just throwing it right back at you.
Oh, thank you.
I so admire everything you're doing.
Oh, thank you. And back at you again.
Okay.
All right.